Are DPS meters ruining World of Warcraft? From a social perspective, most definitely. Let's have a look at what Marcel has to say.
DPS meters destroyed World of Warcraft, and it's all people are obsessing about nowadays. Players get kicked out of groups and guilds, and they get called out.
Yep.
Did we all forget what made WoW special for us? We're
There's
diving
mobbing
deep
going on.
today.
To see exactly how DPS meters destroyed World of Warcraft,
And how we can get back that special feeling that WoW had for us, and why other games just don't use DPS meters. If anything, DPS meters forever changed World of Warcraft. It first of all created the concept of meta. Obviously the meta is not a concept just for WoW, but in terms of WoW, it created basically discrimination between people inviting and not inviting each other into groups, and you being able to play or not play the spec. Listen, you can actually get way easier.
You know what's like funny for me? So the other day, I was on my warrior. I have a Fury warrior, I grinded up. And I've done already several keys, okay? So I have like some sort of scores, right, on my account. But with these add-ons, you only see the scores on the individual character. So even though I'm not a noob in the game, and I have like a record, and you can maybe even look up, no, I'm not sure if you can actually look up the last expansions, like how high the keys were in Shadowlands, if I did like, let's say a plus 20 or plus 16. But on my Fury Warrior, I just did like the Firak thingies. I got like a couple of 402, 411 item level pieces. And I was applying for several plus 2 Mythic Keystone dungeons. And guess what? People declined me even though I was 380 or something item level, and I already have experience with doing keys higher than that. But they don't see this on my character, so they don't know I'm actually not a noob, because it's an alt I'm grinding up. So I had a hard time getting into dungeons because it didn't show my score on this character, because it doesn't show account score, right? So they thought, oh, I'm just a noob or something. Even though I have high level crafted gear and a few good items from the Firak event thingy, right? So I was very frustrated to get declined because I'm not a noob, and those were just plus 2 dungeons.
Between people inviting and not inviting each other into groups, and you being able to play or not play the spec. Listen, you can actually get way easier into groups by playing your spec if that spec is the meta spec. It also created guides. Funny enough, that's how we started doing World of Warcraft content. And the guides created a premise of people needing to research their spec before they can actually play, because they were expected to do so, essentially taking them outside of their game and looking on websites or YouTube videos to figure out exactly how to best perform with their spec. And of course, guides are not something specific to World of Warcraft. There are guides in pretty much most competitive video games nowadays. I'm thinking Diablo 4, I'm thinking League of Legends, I'm thinking even Final Fantasy 14.
That's true.
I'm sure there are some guys there on how to
Oh, Final Fantasy 14 does not have DPS meters, and there are a lot of guides and guides. And why am I using this now as an example? So for those out there that believe if you don't have DPS meters, there's no way to make a guide or give tips on certain specs. That is absolutely wrong. You don't need the numbers to actually make a guide. A guide can also be, how are you most efficiently clearing a dungeon? Like, what skills do better on your spec or in groups than other skills? What is for AoE? What is single time? Like, there are so many ways to make guides and builds that are viable to clear dungeons or raids, where you don't need to know the numbers of how high your DPS performance is. And I just think numbers like that's also what like what they also said in FF14, right? Like, they don't allow DPS meters, so people are not getting bullied for playing a certain non-meta spec, or because they are 200 DPS behind somebody else or something. Like, it's actually really like that. Sometimes like tiny differences are enough to make fun of someone. Like, I did 200 more DPS than you, and I have worse gear than you or something. I have blue gear, you have purple gear, I still do more DPS. Like, people are being bullied just because of that. It's crazy. So yeah, I see why in FF14 they don't allow DPS meters.
Best create your animal class. I don't know anything about Final Fantasy XIV, but what I do know is that because of the guides, it essentially pushed the devs to create more complex and in-depth specs to kind of counteract the fact that the way to
soft.
figure out how a spec plays and how to play better has become a little bit more transparent or a little bit easier, and took away some of the discovery part that the player used to do to kind of figure out where their spec is, and that led us to having more complex specs and button bloat. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Enhancement Shaman. God damn, that's so many buttons, man. Are
That's
DPS
true.
meters even necessary? Well, in some games such as Lost Ark, DPS meters are bannable, and is that a good thing? Well, I don't know, but for sure what I do know is that some games don't have DPS meters, period, like Diablo 4, and they are still very fun. Unbiased opinion. And fun is an important part because sometimes
And you have to consider some classes bring more utility or support capabilities than pure numbers. Like one thing that I feel like World of Warcraft is lacking from this group aspect is all the class specs, and you see Blizzard do this from patch over patch, they remove more and more utility and go more for numbers and DPS. And if you look like how Shaman, how some other classes and how Druid used to be in the past, like they change stuff to add more DPS but remove a bit of utility over the years, right? This is something I feel like it would be cool if we had like more support, kind of half DPS, half support specs, right? Like, yeah, now we have augmentation, evoker, and they're trying it out to add support, but before there were actually some support kind of classes, like just look at freaking Druid and Shaman, but now they have become more for pure DPS than actually half DPS support. So yeah, stuff is changing, and I definitely feel like DPS meters are contributing to that.
And fun is an important part because sometimes you just want to sit down, fire up your game, and have some fun.
Yeah,
and
it
not
should be
worry
about clearing dungeons,
min-maxing
not
your
numbers.
build, spending
Yeah.
time to find that one thing that makes you 2% better instead of just going out there and killing shit. Most
Yeah,
people get
just like in
zero
Diablo.
added value from DPS meters because for most people it's just another source of validation. Other people will not even use DPS meters, period, because why would they? They just want to pop into the game and just slay stuff and loot the stuff from the slayed stuff. Simple.
Yeah.
Why can't games just be simple? All of this hard focus on the DPS meters can create situations where players can just ignore mechanics because of DPS meters. Mechanics have become more and more complicated, not just because the DPS meters, but
Because they
because of
showed
what
them.
the DPS meters created, this meta of figuring out the data on your screen more efficiently. And now everything is a lot more complicated. And because everything is more complicated and you're focused on maximizing your big dips, then you end up ignoring mechanics and you wipe your group, which is not fun for anybody. This
That's true.
creates a pattern and a situation where people are just disconnected from
But not just you end up wiping, because there are actually some add-ons that actually warn you, careful, cleanse, walk out, boss does this one-shot mechanic, so you know, oh, you have to hide now behind something like an ice block or something. Like a good example is Dragonflight Halls of Infusion. There's like this one boss at the end where you have to go behind the ice block, and you have actually add-ons that scream on your screen, that just literally pop up some icon and say hide behind this, boss does this. So actually some add-ons are almost like cheating because they tell you do this, do that in this case, right? Or if you have like something you need to be cleansed, some add-ons actually point this out, you need to cleanse now. So this made also, I think Blizzard make add more complicated and difficult mechanics to actually counter this. And now people that don't use add-ons are almost being punished because you don't know what to do in this case, especially if it's your first run. Like with add-ons, you can do a dungeon for the first time and not wipe. But before, in the past, like when WoW first launched and you wiped or something, there was no add-on telling you, oh, do this or you wipe. You had to find it out the hard way, right? And then you wipe, and then you know, oh, this boss did some fire explosion. Oh shit, yeah, we should have hidden. Or, oh, there's like this one heavy dot. And I think it's actually good to learn it the hard way, not have everything tell you what to do. And like, oh, this add-on tells me I have to go now behind the object. I need to cleanse now. Oh, I need to interrupt this one. Like the add-ons even tell you interrupt and such. It's annoying.
your group, which is not fun for anybody. This creates a pattern and a situation where people are just disconnected from the actual game whenever they're focused on their meters and how much damage they're actually doing, or healing, of course. That not only takes away from the fun aspect of the game of being in the moment, but it also takes away some of the chill and some of the fun that the game can have.
Oh, this
and that's
quest.
only on the individual level, because on a social level, it created bad blood between people because
Yeah.
of DPS meters, and people feeling the social pressure of performing. They might end up pushing their cooldowns whenever they don't have to, and end up potentially wiping their raid because they didn't have the damage when they needed it, and created a severe lack of teamwork, which is just a symptom of people's insecurity that needed to be fed through the validation of a good overall DPS at the end of combat. And to further point out that DPS meters are not necessary to establish performance, to establish relevancy, to clear a content that's particularly difficult, we already have an example, a little bit of the cuff example, where Blizzard created the Proving Grounds a couple of expansions ago, where you went in a solo scenario, did something akin to what a dungeon situation would be, and you would receive a score at the end, whether it's silver or gold, and based on that score, you would be able to
Wow.
join or not join specific groups in terms of looking for people. Obviously, this has evolved into Dungeon Mythic Plus score, but this was a little bit less invasive, a little bit less discriminatory, and if we're going to eliminate the DPS meters completely, we could just replace them with Proving Grounds. That's right? Well, listen, I know that you will contradict everything I said down in the comments. But is it all bad? There are positives as well to the DPS meters being introduced, because it created competitiveness. Because of the DPS meters, we now have proper enrage timers and how to beat boss enrage timers, because now we know if the boss has 10 million HP and it gets the enrage in 6 minutes, we know to divide that HP by the time that we have left, and we need to kind of figure out what the DPS is to kill the boss before the enrage hits. It also created the concept of obstacles to overcome by having performance being evaluated by a number, and of
But like the thing is with the rage timer and all that, you also have this because you have DPS meters though. Like I'll give you an example again, Final Fantasy IV, even Elder Scrolls Online actually is like that. Like, yeah, there are certain phases where a boss does like some super damage, and there are timers. Like in ESO, for example, there's something called Veteran Maelstrom Arena. It's like a solo kind of dungeon you can do, and you can get some really OP weapons at the end of it. And there's like this one phase where a boss actually summons some sort of shadow-like creatures, and if you slay them, you get to teleport up to the platform number 2, where the boss is, and you can DPS the boss. And if you don't do enough damage, you will be more often at the bottom, and you have to teleport up again to get into the damage phase. And some people need 2 phases, some 3 phases, or more depending on their damage. And it's way harder if you need more phases like that, where you have to go down, then up again, down again. And if you just nuke the boss in just 1 or 2 rounds, you are like immediately done with the dungeon, right? But if not, you get to another phase where it's like really hard and you can die. There's like a higher likelihood you die, and then you have to kill some adds in order to get back up to the platform 2 again. And if you look at like Final Fantasy XIV, it doesn't have DPS meters. There are like extreme dungeons and raids. They're like those very difficult modes for people super competitive. And maybe there's also some sort of world first or something as far as I've heard, right? And they don't have DPS meters, and it works. So I wouldn't say, I actually disagree here with Flame, because I think you don't need the numbers for competitive gameplay. Like if you clear difficult content, that is already competitive. Or if there's like a certain phase where there's a oh shit moment, and you have like fewer oh shit moments, then you can use this as a number instead of your numbers, right? Like I said with ESO, if you only get on the platform 2 times to kill the boss, you're doing good DPS. If you do it 3 or 4 times, your DPS is not good. But if you can still clear it, that is good, because it's all about clearing. And there are some people that want to have a tankier build and not be pure DPS, or get more into the support kind of playstyle, right? And I feel like we have this sort of lack of freedom in WoW, and that also makes builds less, like there will be less builds and less specs that will be played because of this imbalance. I think every playstyle should matter and have something unique, and it shouldn't just be about the numbers. Like I think it's cool if you have some DPS specs that do a bit less in numbers but have more utility, and you have those others that are purely numbers. And that's the same with Final Fantasy XIV, right? Like you have the Black Mage, but then you have also the Bard, right? And there's like a bit of support and stuff. Or you have the Astrologian that heals a bit less than some other healers, but you give some buffs to your group, and you can give them cards so they do like more DPS and stuff. So yeah, I kind of hate DPS meters because they restrict the freedom of playstyles and in builds in WoW.
The concept of obstacles to overcome by having performance being evaluated by a number, and of course it does help release some dopamine when you complete that challenge because you had really good performance, often showed by the DPS meter. The best rewards and moments in WoW came after crushing content with optimized playstyles that wouldn't have been possible without the concept of DPS meters. I mean, just look at these guys crushing Ragnaros in a speed kill 16, 17, 18 years ago with 33 Frost Mages, a bunch of tanks and healers. That's not that necessary, and this
Frost
would not have
OP.
been possible without DPS meters kind of telling them, okay, you need this amount of damage to get this boss done. And that's one of the cool things that you can do with the DPS meters. DPS meters help
But
to
dropping health
showcase
bars are like
performance,
DPS meters
to measure
too.
your skill
Well, you
as
see
a
stuff
player, which
dice
definitely
fast.
pushes people to progress and improve as individual players every time, because it definitely helps to measure the difficulty of the content, the efficiency of your build. It helps create achievements, competition, stakes, challenges, rewards, and accomplishments. DPS meters also evolved to showcase useful data when it comes to improving, such as the healing done in a dungeon or a raid, the damage taken by the tanks, maybe you took too much damage, maybe you shouldn't have, the number of interrupts, dispels, to kind of figure how to deal with the mechanics, and not even all of that,
Okay,
but
this is
complex raid.
Okay, this with improving, I agree here. That's true because you can practice and see it, right? How they do this in ESO, for example, is you have target dummies, right? And you can smash on them and you get some sort of score, like how much DPS did you do, this and that. You don't see the DPS like that in the group really in ESO, right? I'm not even sure if in ESO were DPS, like I remember back in the day in ESO there were no DPS add-ons. I don't know if we have them these days, but from what I know is that a lot of elite guilds even don't use that. So you don't really need it. You could say like Final Fantasy XIV and ESO are right now. Does New World have DPS add-on? I'm not sure. I think New World also doesn't have that, right? Or at least not everyone's using that. So I would say like now ESO, Final Fantasy XIV and New World are without those DPS add-ons. And they can do difficult content there too and just do fine. And ESO we have target dummies as some kind of DPS meter, because you can like hit on those and see what the number is. And you can improve that way and have an even more fluent rotation, and you can have some more animation cancelling. You can actually sometimes in ESO make some skills go off faster by performing an action in between, or when a certain skill is at like 90%, because if you interrupt at 90% it still goes off or something, right? So you have to time stuff, and that way you can improve your performance, but you don't see this in a group with an add-on, and that's cool.
How to deal with the mechanics, and not even all of that, but complex raid interactions like add swaps or damage
that was
bosses,
disabled
and
only
even
for
buff
dungeons.
damage. Now with the augmentation
single player,
spec, and
no.
of course it also allowed for the concept of an augmentation spec to be introduced in WoW, because you wouldn't be able to have that without actual DPS meters. So, did the DPS meters destroy WoW?
Ah, that dungeon was fun.
It cracked it, you could say, not completely destroyed. Damaged,
How can
not
your
destroyed.
damage be so low? Play Candy Crush. Are you using your talent properly? Why are you even playing this? We almost missed the timer.
But this is real life, like this is happening in WoW, like seriously. In Shadowlands there was once a guy who was doing like a random dungeon, and there was a guy that did as much DPS as the tank, and he was a DPS, and they actually ended up kicking him because they thought they wouldn't be able to clear certain bosses and stuff. It was very sad. I actually wanted the guy to stay, because I actually said in group chat, you know what, let's keep him, it's fine. Let's just carry him or something. It would be, then we would feel better because we managed to do it with a handicap, right? But they wanted to kick him anyway. It was very terrible.
DPS meters were likely inevitable no matter what. It just depends on which side of the fence you are. The concept of such a system is necessary because the WoW content is timed. In Rage timers, like I mentioned earlier, Mythic Plus timers,
Sadly.
Arena dampening, all of these concepts essentially mean that you have to finish what you need to finish before a specific time is reached. And when you add the concept of time related to your damage output, then you will have to have some form of a DPS meter. And even if the DPS meters were necessary and inevitable, they still destroyed an important aspect of World of Warcraft, and that is the aspect of fun. Playing a video game just for fun, which of course you can still do. You can still play
But it's more
WoW without a
stressful.
DPS meters and still have fun. You can play more chill content like normal and heroic dungeons where performance, although obviously it's important, is not that crucial, where a DPS meter is necessary to kind of monitor. As long as you play your class relatively well, you'll be able
you
to
just
crush
play
this
healer.
content.
You don't
Same
need to,
with LFR
compare
or
yourself
looking
with
for
others.
raid, and maybe even normal raid after getting a lot of gear is
You know, it's like interesting, if you actually play a tank or a healer, you don't have this issue because it doesn't matter how much DPS you output. And if healing, nobody can complain how much healing you have done because as a healer, you heal when people drop low. So I give you an example. You can do a plus 14 with one group and your healing is 20% higher than even on, like, I don't know, the same one but with a different group on the same key level or something, right? So healing depends on how well your group is dodging mechanics, how often they actually use their own self-healing skills or shields if they have that in their class kit, or what specs you bring along, right? So as a healer, you don't get bullied for numbers. You only get bullied if you don't clear the dungeon. Same with tank. Tank, it's only about you taunt the bosses, you know where to stand and how to escape mechanics. That's all. So if you care so much about this, play healer or tank, you will never be bullied by your numbers because each numbers depend on the group and on the run. Like you can do the same dungeon with different groups and you get different numbers on a healer or tank. So yeah.
content that can be done without min-maxing, without meta playing, without DPS meters, period. Ignore the chat and play how you like. Just don't play high stakes content that's super reliant on optimization where the DPS meters are pretty much expected and your social group will judge you by it. Just have fun, because people definitely forgot how to have fun, and that's just a shame. Sure, big damn is really fun for some people, but not always. Enjoying the game and just not getting sucked up into this world is one way to improve your WoW experience, and there are more ways to improve your WoW experience, and we already cover 5 of them in this video, and I guarantee you that you will feel a lot better about logging into World of Warcraft by watching it.
That's nice. But yeah, I think DPS meters, they're definitely a social problem, because like I said, there was a group with me, and yeah, the guy did as much DPS on his DPS as the tank, and people were like calling him out for it and wanted to kick him and stuff. And I felt so bad. I wanted him to stay, even though he's like kind of like a handicap for us. But I was confident in my skill, and I thought I'm good enough, and this one other DPS with me is also performing really well, and we could just carry through it. We could even do this dungeon with 1 player less and clear it, and even still on time. But yeah, the group wanted to kick him, and it wasn't even a high key. I think it was a +8 or something. It was like +8, yeah, was it? I think it was just a +8, yeah. So it was very dumb. But yeah, I think DPS meters, like, they make you feel stressful as well, because you constantly compare yourself with others, and instead of looking at the mechanics at times, or what's like happening around you and the beautiful animations, you often like move with your eye on your DPS meter and are like, oh, is my DPS fine and stuff, right? Kind of like that. So it's annoying, definitely. But the thing is now, if Blizzard wants to remove now DPS meters, some people are going to rage at it. I feel like we're at a point where it's like almost too late. Like, maybe there's still an option or possibility for them to remove it, but we're at a point where everyone's like so used to them, and some people need them for some ego reasons, or they want to show off that they are the best in the game by numbers, that a lot of people will get upset if now Blizzard removed it. I think we're already beyond removing it, unfortunately. Like, this should have happened maybe during, I don't know, Cataclysm or something, or some earlier expansion, I would say. Now we are already too much into it. It's probably too late. But yeah, what do you guys think about DPS meters? Should they stay in the game? Should they be removed? And have you ever made bad experiences with DPS meters? Like I have, but not on me personally, but on someone in a group where they kind of like felt hurt, sad, and it was like terrible that this person got kicked and called out for low DPS. I felt very bad for that guy. If I wanted him to just stay, but yeah. If you have made such experiences, let me know in the comment section. And if you guys are new to this channel, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content. If you guys enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give this one a thumbs up. And I will see you guys next time.